Please welcome, with the goal of Bitcoin, Aaron van Wirdum, Ben de Waal, and Kemal Yashar. I'm not used to say your surname, my friend.
You did well.
It was good.
Whoa. All right. Guess we're here to discuss the question why we're here. Kind of. So I'm really happy to be not alone here to answer this question, but have very experienced and knowledgeable Bitcoiners here with me who've dug into the history of Bitcoin, the prehistory of Bitcoin. I think we need to dig in to go back in history a little bit, even before Bitcoin maybe, to understand why we're here. Yeah?
Is it working actually? No. No, right? Oh, it is? Okay,
it does
good.
work, yeah. Do you guys agree with that approach?
I do.
Yep, sounds good.
Let's go.
All right, let's start then. How far do we have to go back?
Well, yeah, so I did happen to write a book on this topic called the Genesis book. There's still 2 left.
Go get them.
They're signed and everything, yeah. Great get.
I'd say...
Let me answer the actual question after pitching my book again. Well, yeah, so I went back. There's sort of 2 storylines in the book. So, well, I'll stop mentioning the book now. I'll just answer your question.
I mean, your book is on that subject as well. It's very related. It's fair to mention it. So
okay, well, so yeah.
This is why you're here, buddy.
Well, okay, so in that case, so there's 2 storylines in the book, and I sort of explored 2 parts of the history, and in the book they sort of merge throughout the book. One of them is the economic history, and it starts with Hayek, mostly Hayek. It's very based on Hayek, and Hayek's big idea in the 70s was that money should be a free market phenomenon. So rather than having the state manage money, he said it should be up to the people to decide what they want to use, and if anyone can use whatever money they want to use, then the best form of money will eventually emerge. It's like money should be this emergence property. It's a little bit like language, for example. Like no one really imposes language. It never happens that someone sat down and sort of designed language, and these are all the grammar rules, and this is what word, what sound means what. And no, it just emerged as people wanted to communicate. Language emerged, and he says, in the same way, money should be this emergent phenomenon. Just keep the state out of it. That's how we get the best form of money. He also had some ideas on what that money would look like specifically. I'll set that aside for now. But I would say that's sort of one of the big goals of Bitcoin, the separation of money and state. Then the other storyline is, it ties in obviously, the other storyline is about the creation of digital cash, if you will. And what that meant originally was a form of money that you can use anonymously. So cypherpunks, and before that David Chaum, they foresaw that in the future money will probably go digital, but then it really matters how that money is designed. So do we want to live in a future where money is digital and it's managed by some company or some organization, or maybe the state itself, and this company, organization, state can track exactly who's paying who owns how much, basically a complete obsolescence of privacy, the privacy that cash, physical cash, does offer. So they set out to create a form of digital money that could be used privately. Now these ideas eventually got merged. This happened in the extropian movement for a big part, where they said, okay, let's use this technology, this digital cash technology, this system that allows for private transactions, and then also embed sort of this Hayekian idea of separating money and state. So I do think even today, Bitcoin has these 2 separate goals in a way, and they're both embedded in Bitcoin. And you even see this sort of in the community, that there's some people that are more interested in the privacy part, some people that are more interested in the sort of hard money part, and sometimes they don't really see eye to eye. There's like different philosophies. But I argue Bitcoin really comes out of both these subcultures. You really need to have both for it all to sort of make sense.
Beautiful. Yeah, I think these guys at that time made a lot of interesting theses that were very novel at that time. very visionary, looking ahead like 20, 30, 40 years into a future with technology that was totally not available at that time. Trying to mitigate risks and threats that were totally not present at that time. And they made some very interesting theses. I think a lot of that is playing out now that we look back and we look at them and call them visionaries. Would you, from your research, say that there has also been things where these guys have been wrong?
Oh, that's a great question. I have to be. Wow, I have never got that question before. I mean, they implemented systems that didn't quite work, like they were on the wrong path at some point. What a great question. This is the first time that I've gotten it. I don't have a great answer. I will say, yeah, so they learned a lot of lessons along the way. Like they made a lot of mistakes along the way.
But that's the open source process, right? Like you try something, it fails, and you just go back and to the drawing board and you fix the reason why it failed.
Yeah, I mean, a big one that's worth mentioning is, for example, eCash, the first digital cash system, was centralized. They had a play currency, and it depended on a central server. And at some point, when the company went down, that meant everyone who owns these coins, everyone who owned that cash, just had no cash anymore. It was just gone. Specifically, there was no way to know if the cash had already been spent, so the double spending problem in a way. But in either case, these coins were just completely useless. So that was a very big lesson for a lot of the cypher guys like Adam Back to figure if we want a digital cash system to work, it needs to be decentralized.
I'll pass the question over to you, Ben. You've been very early on in Bitcoin. I know you read a lot, you philosophize a lot. And you're also interested in like political theory, philosophical things. Like I'm sure you're familiar. Maybe you don't agree with all the Austrian stuff. How does it look from your end? Like these visionaries whose technology we are seeing as kind of like a salvation almost from these inevitable threats that the cypherpunks and saw coming upon us. Is there something that doesn't really play out as they predicted?
So yeah, it's an interesting question because I think a lot of the time it's not actually a matter of the correct direction or not, it's a matter of degrees. So something which we are seeing throughout history, and you can go back a lot further than just recent history, you can go back thousands of years, is that things that used to be hyper-local started becoming more spread out, and at first that spreading out was a very decentralized kind of approach, simply because there was no way to centralize things. But as we improved our technology, as we improved our communication abilities, and by technology I may even include things like riding horses is a technology. And as we started doing those sort of things, we were able to maintain larger groups of people. And we started going beyond how humans are natively able to understand our relationships with others. And I think a lot of the questions around money are actually questions around societal organization. Because money is, as I mentioned in my talk earlier, simply a matter of figuring out intersubjective value. I value something, you value something. How do we go about actually, trading and me giving you something that you want, you giving me something that I want? And in tiny groups, this wasn't an issue. If you listen to a lot of economics professors who haven't studied anthropology, they will tell you that once upon a time there was no money, and these primitive tribes would simply trade with each other, and there was always this problem of I want to give you a bear skin and you want to give me meat or whatever, but right now you don't want that thing and I don't want that thing, and so we don't have a coincidence of our wants, and that's going to cause a problem. All of that's completely untrue. If you ask any anthropologist, that's actually not how history worked. Really, actually, things were largely debt-based in the majority of our early human prehistory. We didn't trade goods with each other. We simply owed each other favors, owed each other things because we would give stuff to our local tribe and they would give stuff back to us. And it kind of worked itself out in the end. That works on a hyper-local scale. That doesn't work as soon as you start increasing the size of things. So as soon as we started riding horses around and building empires, all of that broke down. And that's when we started inventing these more complex things. And initial money worked very well because initial money tended to be hard money. It tended to be things which it's hard to get. It was an obvious thing to use as money, whether that be shells or special stones or later things like precious metals. It worked, but those things have their limits as well. And so as we kept creating new technology, we started solving for some of the scale problems and breaking everything else in the process. And that's essentially where all of the problems with fiat money comes from. It comes from trying to scale money without thinking about what money actually is. So I think the technological solutions that we're building with Bitcoin and some of the technologies around it are the approach to go back to a proper monetary standard that works at scale in the same way that those hyper-local things used to work.
Can I answer the question again? I have a good answer this time. I had to think about it for a minute. The biggest thing the cypherpunks were wrong about is that they thought people would care about privacy. They anticipated, the internet is coming up. People are gonna want to use privacy technologies. They're gonna want to encrypt their emails. They're gonna want to hide their internet traffic. They're gonna want to use electronic cash. But then when mainstream adoption started to happen, it turned out no one actually gave a damn. And this really led to a lot of disillusionment as well for a lot of the cypherpunks. Probably also why some of them weren't interested in Bitcoin anymore, like they'd sort of given up on the entire idea. But yeah, that was something they all expected. Like there were a number of startups that were specifically designed to offer privacy in different ways, DigiCash being one of them, but there were others. Also for regular internet traffic type of privacy, and they just completely failed because there was no market for it essentially.
Yeah, that's an interesting and good point. So I live in Turkey and I moved there from Germany 4 years ago, and Germany has a very vibrant hacker scene, lots of privacy awareness, lots of people working on technologies, educating, like I came to Turkey and it's like totally absent. Basically the perception there is that the more information you share with institutions, the more convenient your life becomes. And the dangers of sharing information are not really acknowledged or understood. And they are to some degree also a little bit abstract, because they don't always materialize, right? But when they materialize, it's like a devastating event, probably, right? Like almost a black swan event.
Yeah, the nice thing about Bitcoin, of course, is that it doesn't only offer transaction privacy, although it's imperfect and it needs to be improved, but there is also this financial incentive for people to, like, even if people don't care about the privacy part, there's still an incentive for them to start accepting Bitcoin. Like, I'm pretty convinced that if Bitcoin didn't have this financial incentive embedded in it, this incentive to adopt it, then it probably would go nowhere. Like, we've seen that before with, for example, eCash. It just went nowhere. Like, if that was the only thing Bitcoin offered, it would probably go nowhere. It's important that it offers it, and it needs to be improved, but the only way it's ever gonna reach anything close to mass adoption is if there's also this financial incentive, I think.
That's an interesting point you raised there. So basically, if we sum up, like the cypherpunk approach to digital cash, on the other hand, the Hayekian Austrian economist school approach of a free market money, hard money that's capped, that cannot be inflated, separate from the state, a private money basically, not a state decreed money. Was married by Satoshi, and he also had a chapter about privacy in the white paper, and with a very novel concept where all transactions are public, but their users are pseudonymous, basically, with addresses. So he brought these two strains together, and you just said if there was, if I understand correctly, like if Bitcoin was not hard money, there would have been no incentive for the network to, or for users to bootstrap the network. Like basically this early advantage of the prospect of a hard asset that will appreciate in value over time was seen by Satoshi as a means to bootstrap a network from zero? Is that what you're saying?
I think the two sides need each other, and they may not even always realize that. Like the hard money people, they need the tech people to make sure that the technology is actually unstoppable, because otherwise, like what happened to eCash, for example, just got shut down. It was I say eCash, but I meant eGold, but both. Well, no, eGold got shut down, eCash just failed. But yeah, if you try to offer a hard money system like eGold and it's centralized, then it's just going to shut down. So the hard money people really need the tech people to make sure that it can't be shut down. And I think the tech people really need the hard money people, so to say, so there's an incentive for people to start using this stuff in the first place. People don't care about privacy enough in itself.
And I remember when the first time Saifedean Ammous's book, The Bitcoin Standard, came out, I was at a lecture in Munich where he presented it, and that part that you need basically this incentive to bootstrap the network made a lot of sense to me, but I was still like indoctrinated at that time by this central bank narrative that we need 2% inflation for the economy to grow. And I asked Saifedean, like, how does this whole play out if we don't have this growth anymore in a deflationary system? And he just laughed and said that I was psyoped. I mean, he did elaborate a little bit more, and but yeah, it's a number that came out of nowhere, right? And it's interesting, this 2%, I mean.
Yeah, there really is no evidence that any level of inflation is required. You can say that under certain systems that having inflation makes things more stable, but that's a problem with the system. It's not that inflation is required under any system. So you look at, again, the history of money, and you can see that the vast majority of historical monetary systems had no inflation and were working perfectly fine. And then as soon as some kind of inflation was actually put into the system, it all broke. You see that in the Roman Empire, you see that in China, the Khans. So yeah, inflation, there is simply no evidence that it's required, and all of the economists who say it is are using circular reasoning because they always point back to the system that they're in and say, this system will break if we don't have inflation. And yeah, that's true. That system will break because it's a bad system.
All right, so we're getting a little bit closer. I think we lined out a little bit where we come from. Then we have a couple of hints from Satoshi as well as to why Bitcoin, right? Like, what's the goal of it? I think he mentions right in the beginning of the white paper, basically trusted third parties, and a history full of breaches of trust that has been basically giving to these centralized institutions. You mentioned the separation of money and state as one potential candidate for a goal. There are people who disagree. They want to put, I don't know, all sorts of stuff onto the Bitcoin blockchain, and like the separation of money and state can we agree on that goal as a community, or is that too narrow?
I think we as a community can't ever agree on anything, and that's actually probably a good thing. I would say most older Bitcoiners, most people who have been around Bitcoin for a while, would probably agree that separation of money and state is one of the central goals. But I'm always willing to say, okay, if there are other people who don't have that goal, I can at least say it's still my goal, and maybe what they're doing will help me achieve my goal, even if it's not theirs.
Are you referring to like ordinals and that nonsense?
I mean, there are all sorts of people that say we can't know what the goal of Bitcoin is, and it is what it is, and if you use it for that, then it's that. Yes?
I mean, I think that's ultimately true in a way. Ultimately, users decide how they want to use Bitcoin. There's no one that actually gets to define anything in that sense. like it is an emergent phenomenon, as I mentioned earlier. So yeah, if enough people want Bitcoin to be one thing or another thing, then that's probably the direction it will drift in. Personally, I'm not worried about ordinals or inscriptions. I mean, I think they're like an annoying distraction, but anything you would want to do to solve it is more harmful than the actual problem. So it's not really worth worrying about too much, I think. And I pretty strongly suspect it's a fad, but you know, we'll see.
We'll see. Well, there was some concern, and it's interesting to think about what would happen if there was a strong fad, like maybe even fueled by malicious actors who really have a lot of resources at their disposal. Like, what would happen to our dream of separating money and state? Like, and would we have anything to counter that?
I mean, if it comes to inscriptions specifically, as far as I'm concerned, the solution is the block size limit. Like, that's what it's there for. It limits the amount of data that can be included in blocks, and that includes spam data or whatever other type of garbage you want to throw in there. Like, without the block size limit, inscriptions would be a real problem. Now, I would say it's just an annoyance. Was your question more broadly? Like,
I mean, well, it looks like it's a bit of a fad, like you said, like going away. But if it had like serious resources behind it, right? In a world where you still can buy Bitcoin with money that's printed out of thin air, like a state-level attacker basically created and supercharged their attack onto Bitcoin with these infinite resources, what would happen?
So, could I? Yeah. I think that last thing you said there is kind of the misunderstanding. Nobody has infinite resources, so they can print money out of nothing, but the continuous printing of it makes it worth less and less. Bitcoin is inherently tied to energy, but so is everything else, and that's something a lot of people seem to forget. Energy is the only actual currency we have in this universe. So if there is a sustained attack on Bitcoin, they don't have unlimited resources, and they will burn their resources attacking Bitcoin, and it will take longer, and eventually they will fail. I mean, yeah, they can probably attack it for a long time, but they can't attack it forever, and eventually they run out, and eventually, actually way before that, they realize the attack is pointless, it's not helpful, all they're doing is burning their own energy. You know, why not work with this thing instead of against it? You know, obviously people are pig-headed at times, and it might take them a long time to realize that, but yeah, energy is the fundamental currency of the universe, and they can't change that no matter how much money they decide to just print out of nothing.
All right. You want to add something?
yeah, but I'm not sure if it's off topic. Like, personally, I'm way more concerned about sort of the real life risks, like developers getting arrested, which we're seeing nowadays. The lack of privacy and how that could maybe be stopped from improving. Like that seems to be the strategy right now, and that is something states actually can do and do. So rather than worrying about inscriptions, I think that's a much bigger concern for.
100% agreed. So actually, a little bit of my background I didn't mention earlier in my talk. I fell into Bitcoin because I have been involved in anarchy for many, many years, much longer than I've been involved in Bitcoin, way longer than before Bitcoin existed. I was interested in anarchism as a viable political system. You know, how do we get rid of states in general? How do we organize ourselves as free individuals in societies? How do we come together and actually build new systems? And I've always thought one of the best ways is to build something alternative to the existing system and make the existing system obsolete. So Bitcoin was obviously that to me for money. I do think we need to do it in other realms as well, like education and transport and logistics and how we build cities. We need to make governments obsolete in basically everything, and money is the huge one. Money's the big thing. So when it comes to things like people being arrested and so on, I agree that is a serious concern. That is the big thing right now because they continue to have that power. But I actually think that is something else we can take away from them. Maybe Bitcoin helps us do that. It's not the only thing though.
All right.
I just noticed we wear a similar hoodie, right?
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Is yours mathematically? No, yours is wrong. Mine's right.
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
You got to have the
I took
limits.
I took the shortcut.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. So, some wrap it up. Well, you can join us if you like. Come here. Come here.
I can sit here and talk for hours as long as these people keep listening to us. So I'm happy to keep talking.
So I have one more question, and then I'll pass it on to Patrick. Maybe he wants to ask you something. So I've been wondering, like, there is so much to Bitcoin. It touches so many things. There's such a rich history that's also not easy to really digest. We have to basically become an expert in all sorts of topics that if you're not really, I don't know, went to a technical university, like it's a steep learning curve. And then economics is like a whole in its own, you know, like, and like Jamie Oliver had this nice quote where he said, like, Bitcoin is everything you don't understand about computers combined with everything you don't understand about economics. I think it's very apt. So we like to dive into these things and basically try to understand what is money, what's the problem with it, how should an ideal money be for the society that we envision. Obviously, there are different views of what an ideal society would look like, asking different people. I think what unites us, I would say, even though we are a very heterogeneous community, is that everybody values individual liberty and freedom. Maybe we can have consensus on that. I mean, we almost have, I think, at least implicitly. Yeah, how do we form consensus on other things when it's time to make a decision as a community? I mean, the history of making a decision, coming to consensus has been quite messy. It's a short but messy history of wars, basically, and disagreements and a lot of pain and arguments, bruised egos and rage quits. Is this how it works in Bitcoin going forward, or do we have a better way?
Personally, I really love the idea of futures markets. So what we saw sort of in the last stage of the block size war, where people could start to trade SegWit2x coin versus sort of legacy Bitcoin, if you want, or, you know, the original Bitcoin. And that really gave the market a voice to sort of show, look, this is what we value more. And I think if you implement that sort of in a more structural way, that can actually be used to always inform everyone about whether an upgrade is desirable or not. And it doesn't replace anything. Like everything we already do, arguing on Twitter, the dev list, the GitHub, like it all just can continue to exist. But then you can add the futures market as a sort of very clear signal to what users actually want, what the market actually wants. It's not perfect. It's not a 100% perfect solution, but I think it's a very powerful one. And I would really like that idea to be repeated in the future if we have anything near, some sort of debate or contentious thing that, where people want different things for Bitcoin.
But Aaron, how does that affect now that, for instance, BlackRock has a large stake in Bitcoin? And for instance, if there is some push from Wall Street to implement a certain feature that the cypherpunks would not have implemented, there will be some very interesting dynamics, I say, which will probably be different from the previous.
Not that different. I mean, if you recall, the SegWit2x side had all the big players. Like, they had the Coinbases, they had everyone with, like, all the big Bitcoin balances. The problem is, just having the Bitcoin doesn't give you the vote. You have to actually put your coins at risk. You have to actually put your money where your mouth is. That's the only way your vote matters. So if you're betting all your money on something that will actually be unpopular with other people, then you're just going to lose your money. Like, you really have to think about what will be popular, not just what I want, but what will be the more, valuable version of Bitcoin, essentially.
But don't you think there might be a situation where the most valuable version of Bitcoin is not the one where the cypherpunks would support?
I mean, it's plausible, and in that case, there may be a split, and maybe that's not the end of the world either, and then you'll have sort of the cypherpunk version of Bitcoin and the corporate version. Personally, I think the cypherpunk version will actually be more valuable. I think the value of Bitcoin is essentially that you can make censorship-resistant payments, that you have hard money. That you, like, if you take that away, then what is the actual value actually? So I wouldn't expect that to happen personally.
Yeah, I quite simply don't think it would be Bitcoin anymore. What they would have is some kind of centralized database with an imaginary asset on it. It's entirely irrelevant to Bitcoin at that point. So, if they want to call it Bitcoin, fine, but it isn't. We would continue using what's actually Bitcoin, and they would use their centralized database thing.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I'm looking a bit at the time, and I know what the schedule will be for actually breaking down everything. But maybe one last thing.
Maybe let's ask the audience. Do you have questions for Ben or Aaron about, or comments, what the goal of Bitcoin is? Did we do a good job summing up all the uncertainties and diving into all the directions that might be relevant to answering this question?
Or a question for Patrick or Kamal?
Well,
Yeah, we have one question. I see one question in the corner.
Okay.
Let's see what the question is.
Question for Patrick. What are the dates for adopting Bitcoin next year?
yeah, okay.
What was the question? I didn't hear it. Maybe someone else.
What will be the date for adopting Bitcoin next year? I'm still not sure if there will be an adopting Bitcoin Arnhem next year. Of course, there'll still be in El Salvador, and Cape Town is also planned. But in Arnhem, I think maybe we should do it once every other year or something like that, or just
not every decade.
Yeah,
not every
sorry,
decade.
folks. Sorry, folks. But I see it as a compliment. All the booze I'm getting here.
Yeah, I mean, we wanted to also get Herman maybe. We have one more room here on the couch. Come over, Herman. Join us. We wanted to make an announcement anyway. While we're on the topic, right? Please give a hand of applause for Herman. Stay here. You don't have to run. All right, so I guess I'll just say that thank you everyone for coming to Adopting Bitcoin in Arnhem. It's the first one on the European continent in the beautiful city of Arnhem. Really great to be here. Big round of applause for the team that brought this fantastic conference here. Yeah, we wanted to grab the opportunity to tell you guys that this is not the last Adopting Bitcoin this year. So there's going to be an Adopting Bitcoin in November in El Salvador, Bitcoin country, where the Adopting Bitcoin origin story basically started after the adoption of legal tender by the government of El Salvador in 2021. And it's going to happen again this year, on November 15 to 16. And there's a couple of changes that we have. First and foremost, I want to say hi to my lovely colleague Noor, who is on maternal leave, who's been my co-organizer for the last 3 years. She is now, how did Satoshi say it? She has moved on to other things. And so we have a new team, and basically it's all Salvadoran Bitcoiners that are living in El Salvador with skin in the game, who are working daily on Bitcoin adoption there. And I think this is really important to have skin in the game in what you're doing. and putting your money where your mouth is, and your proof of work, and all those things. This really like dawned upon me when I was in Cape Town earlier this year, where we had the first Adopting Bitcoin in Africa, in South Africa, led by Herman and Kotatsu from Machankura, and Ricky and Max, and a lot of other amazing helpers in the South African Bitcoin community. It's really impressive what amazing community there is. It was my first time in Africa, and I fell in love, I must admit. It's a really beautiful place. And I heard you guys are doing it again too, Herman. Can you tell more about it?
Yeah, it's planned for January 24, 25, 2025. So again, the last weekend of January, as we did it this year. And yeah, I think the website has gone live. I think tickets are on sale as of today. We have different pricing structures depending how early you buy. And it was a fantastic experience this year, and we definitely want to do it again.
Yeah, and I'll pass the mic for Patrick, to Patrick.
You're finished, Kamal? Okay, well, thanks, Kamal, for just inviting me actually to also do the Adopting Bitcoin conference. Actually, I asked you if you were okay with using the brand, and it was very easy to persuade you into it because you were on the same page as me on the Bitcoin topic. So that was the easy part. I'm just going to stand up here. It feels a bit more comfortable. So thanks, Ben and Aaron and Kamal for the last panel. You did a great job, and Herman, of course, for his talks. And this actually is the end of Adopting Bitcoin Arnhem. And but there will be an after party at the food hall in Arnhem, which is near the River Rhine, where there's many food stamps where you can get something to eat and something to drink at the bar. And of course, you can pay with Bitcoin at all these places. But please do not order from the table QR code, but just go to the stands and the bar to order there and make sure that they accept Bitcoin over there. I really like to thank all the sponsors who made this possible. I'm not going to do a whole list of all the sponsors again, but you can see them on the side screen who these folks are who actually made this financially feasible to do. And I'm just really glad that they did it. Please give a round for all the sponsor people here. Woo! I guess, people, this is it. So I have to ask you to leave the venue and then, enjoy yourself in Arnhem. Visit all the merchants that accept Bitcoin, and I hope to see you again in the future in this.
Wait, don't move. I'm sorry. There is a surprise for you, Patrick. Please, come. Look at this.
I'll take this.
Woo!
I don't know if this mic is on, but of course, Patrick, if you can hold this. I'll take the little writing that comes with this, and it says, this homage to privacy was made when the war on privacy in Bitcoin started. Government caged multiple people during the creation of this art piece. And you worked more than 10 years on this to make this possible, so thank you.
Oh, cool.
Now you can leave. Hope you had a nice day. See you at the after party.